Every country has its own version. The cartels of Mexico, the Kinahan network in Ireland, the outlaw crews in Australia and South Africa. Each one built on loyalty, drugs, and death. Inside these worlds, violence isn't random, it's currency. Every execution sends a message. This is what happens when you cross the line. But over the last decade, that message went global because the killers no longer hide in the dark. They film everything and upload it for millions to see. It always begins the same way. A camera turns on and someone knows they're not walking away. And in Mexico, these videos became their own language. No subtitles, no explanations, just violence, filmed to speak for itself. Guerrero Cartel Execution, Mexico 2024. The Mexican state of Guerrero is more battlefield than province. Here, the hills are ruled by men with rifles, and the police are just another armed faction. For decades, the region has been home to splintered cartels fighting over drug routes, extortion rackets, and the loyalty of small villages trapped in between. The locals call it Tierra de Nadie, no man's land. In early 2024, a new clip appeared online, just a few minutes long, grainy and handheld. But what it showed would echo far beyond Guerrero. The footage began with the sound of wind, and then the voice of a man shouting orders. The camera shook, pointing down a narrow dirt trail where a line of captives knelt in the dust. Their hands were bound, faces swollen from beatings. Behind them, the mountains loomed like silent witnesses. The gunmen were members of a Guerrero-based cartel, one of dozens that had splintered from larger crime groups, each faction fighting not only the state, but one another. They filmed everything, proof of dominance in a war with no end. One of the shooters barked a warning. This is what happens when you betray the boss. The others laughed, not nervously, but like men performing for an audience, and in a way they were. Moments later, rifles opened fire. No hesitation. A dozen rounds per man, methodical and cold. The camera operator didn't flinch. He stepped closer as the bodies fell, capturing each face, each twitch. When the gunfire stopped, the silence felt heavier than the shots themselves. Then came the final act. The men poured fuel over the bodies. Someone muttered a prayer, or a curse, before the match was struck. Flames swallowed the hillside, and the camera tilted up to the sky, showing the black smoke rising like a banner. Hours later, the video surfaced online under a familiar caption, "This is Guerrero. Remember who owns this land." Within days, intelligence analysts traced it back to a breakaway cell believed to be fighting both the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels for control of local production routes. But no arrests followed. No one stepped forward. In Guerrero, justice burns as quickly as the bodies left behind. For those who watched, the message was clear. This wasn't just a killing, it was theater. A performance designed to terrify rivals, silence informants, and remind the world that Guerrero remains one of the darkest corners of Mexico's cartel war. And as the footage spread, one question lingered among investigators. If this was what they chose to show, what horrors were never filmed? That video wasn't the first, and it wouldn't be the last. Because 1 year earlier, another clip surfaced, one that shocked even hardened cartel watchers. It didn't come from the mountains, but from a quiet town in western Mexico. And this time, the victims weren't gangsters. They were teenagers, 5 young men who thought they were heading to a job interview. What happened next became one of the most disturbing cartel videos ever seen. Jalisco, 5 young men video, Mexico, 2023. They were ordinary in the way young men can be, talking about work, arranging a meeting, hopeful enough to say yes. A cartel used a promise, a job interview, a chance to leave. It was a lie. The footage begins with laughter that doesn't belong in what follows. Phones on tables, shoes on pavement, 5 men walking together. Minutes later, the tone changes. Hands grabbed, faces covered, cameras switch on. What makes this clip different is the cruelty of its setup. The captors forced them to fight one another, blows traded under the prodding of rifles, then filmed the collapse of every resistance. It was humiliation before execution, a ritual to erase dignity and turn victims into proof. When the killing came, it was perfunctory and public. Shots fired at close range, young bodies dropping where they'd argued only moments before about shifting schedules and money. The camera never left them. It lingered on faces as if to catalogue failure. Prosecutors later revealed how the trap was laid: false job offers, contact numbers that led nowhere, a methodical baiting of the vulnerable. The video traveled fast, surfacing on encrypted channels and then in public feeds, where it reached families, friends, and the wider community like a stain. For authorities, the clip was both evidence and indictment. But for the cartel that released it, the aim was simpler: to terrorize. Make recruitment seem like a gamble with death. Make witnesses think twice. Make the message clear: no one is safe, not even those who believe they are stepping toward escape. And yet the footage did more than scare. It sparked outrage, investigations, arrests of low-level operatives, and a rare public reckoning in Jalisco about how cartels target the young. Still, the broader systems that allow such lures to succeed, poverty, lack of opportunity, corrupt or overstretched authorities, remained. When the video finally died down online, the question it left behind was quieter and harder to answer. How many others were promised a way out and walked into a trap? From forced interviews in Jalisco to a different kind of spectacle in Europe. A night meant for sport turned into an execution captured by hotel cameras. A single bullet, a crowded room, and a gangland message that crossed oceans. Regency Hotel hit, Dublin, Ireland, 2016. February 5, 2016. The Regency Hotel, North Dublin. A quiet afternoon turned into one of Europe's most infamous gangland moments, all captured by CCTV. Inside, a boxing weigh-in was underway. Reporters, cameras, and fighters filled the small conference hall. Among them was David Byrne, a senior member of the Kinahan cartel. He wasn't armed, he wasn't hiding. He believed he was safe. Then the doors burst open. Men dressed in tactical police uniforms stormed in, automatic weapons raised. At first everyone thought it was a raid, until the shooting started. Byrne was hit instantly. Bullets tore through chairs, tables, and walls as the crowd scattered. Screams drowned the sound of gunfire, while one gunman chased a target down the corridor, firing with precision. The whole assault lasted less than 30 seconds. When it ended, David Byrne lay dead on the floor. The killers fled in a getaway van. No arrests were made that day, but within hours, police knew this wasn't a random attack. It was a declaration of war. The Regency hit marked the beginning of a blood feud between the Kinahan cartel and their rivals, the Hutch Gang. Dozens would die in the years that followed. Shootings in broad daylight, murders in cars, homes, and cafes, each side fighting for control of Dublin's cocaine routes. The CCTV footage from that day spread across Europe, frame by frame, second by second, dissected by media, replayed by investigators. For many, it symbolized how far organized crime in Ireland had evolved, no longer hidden in alleys or pubs, but carried out in public and recorded for everyone to see. The assassins were disciplined, almost military. Their disguises, police vests, fake badges, tactical gear, were designed to humiliate law enforcement and show that the gang could move like an army. In under a minute, they rewrote the rules of European organized crime. The Kinahan empire, once untouchable, had been exposed through the lens of a hotel security camera. And in that exposure, a new era of Irish gang violence was born, one that would leave Dublin soaked in paranoia for years to come. Across the sea, another camera would capture something different. Not a raid, not chaos, but the quiet precision of a lone killer waiting in the dark. A man who once wrote about crime, becoming its next headline. Martin Koch execution, Amsterdam, Netherlands, 2016. Amsterdam after midnight. Narrow streets slick with rain, bars closing, taxis idling under neon light. Martin Koch knew this world better than anyone. A former gangster turned crime blogger, he had built his fame exposing the same men he once worked beside. His website published names, connections, betrayals, the kind of secrets that get people killed. For months, Koch received warnings. Stop writing. He didn't. He laughed them off, even posted the threats online. But the men watching him weren't joking. On December 8, 2016, surveillance cameras caught him leaving a club in Laren, a quiet town outside Amsterdam. He looked relaxed, chatting with a companion, unaware that a black Volkswagen was idling just beyond the parking lot. Inside sat the shooter, patient, calm, waiting for the perfect angle. Koch opened his car door. A flash, then another. Bullets tore through the windshield, shattering the calm night into chaos. He slumped against the seat as the gunman stepped closer, fired again, and disappeared into the dark. The entire murder was captured by security cameras, silent, surgical, over in seconds. By morning, the footage had circulated across Europe, a digital ghost of a man who once lived to expose others' crimes. Dutch investigators later linked the hit to an international drug network operating out of Belgium and Spain, the same syndicates Koch had been writing about. It wasn't just revenge. It was a message to anyone who thought words could challenge money, violence, or silence. Martin Koch had spent years documenting the underworld. In the end, the underworld documented him. Across the continent, another camera would record a scene that looked almost casual. A sunlit bar, beach air, and tourists passing by. Then, without warning, a masked gunman stepped inside and turned an ordinary afternoon into a public execution. Costa del Sol bar shooting, Fuengirola, Spain, 2025. The Costa del Sol has long been called the Costa del Crime, a strip of paradise where fugitives, traffickers, and money launderers blend in with tourists chasing the sun. Fuengirola, a quiet seaside town, seemed untouched by that reputation until the day a masked man walked through the door of a crowded bar and changed everything. The CCTV footage begins like any other summer afternoon. Music, laughter, locals drinking along the counter, tourists eating by the window. At 4:27 p.m., a figure appears. Hoodie up, face covered, handgun drawn. He moves fast, straight toward a man sitting near the back with a woman beside him. No words, no warning, just a single deliberate execution. The first shot hits the man in the chest, the second, the woman as she tries to run. The gunman doesn't rush. He fires again, steps back, and vanishes into the light outside. Within seconds, chaos fills the room. Shouts, chairs crashing, people crawling for cover. But the killer was already gone. By the time police arrived, the victims were dead. The footage would later show how calmly it all unfolded, 30 seconds that looked almost rehearsed. Investigators traced the male victim to an organized crime group with ties to the Irish Kinahan network and Balkan traffickers operating along Spain's southern coast. He had enemies in multiple countries, men who had waited years for their chance to settle the score. Police believe the order came from across the border, part of a cycle of retaliation stretching from Dublin to Marbella. For the public, the video was another glimpse into how ordinary spaces, bars, gyms, cafes, have become killing grounds for Europe's hidden wars. For the gangs, it was something else entirely, a reminder that nowhere is safe, not even under the sun. The shooter was never caught. His image, frozen mid-step, pistol raised, still circulates online, a silent figure who brought the violence of the underworld into broad daylight. Every execution leaves a shadow, and sooner or later it finds its way back to the one who cast it. Next time, the camera didn't capture a warning or a message. It captured irony. A man who built his name on death, meeting it in the same way he delivered it. Hamad Assad assassination, Sydney, Australia, 2016. The footage begins with stillness, a quiet suburban street, sunlight cutting across parked cars, the sound of birds somewhere off-screen. Then a driveway door slides open. Hamad Assad steps out of his vehicle. For years, his name had circulated through Sydney's underworld, a feared enforcer, a man tied to shootings, debts, and drug disputes. They called him the Executioner, a title earned in blood and one that would follow him to the end. As he walks toward his home, two figures appear at the edge of the frame, faces covered, gloved hands, no words, just movement. The first shot hits him in the back, then another. Assad collapses against his car as the shooters close in, firing until he stops moving. One bends down, checks for life, then both vanish, leaving only silence and a trail of smoke. His family was inside the house when it happened. They ran out seconds later, screaming for help, unaware that everything had already been captured by their own security cameras. Police later confirmed what many suspected. Assad had made too many enemies. He'd survived an earlier attempt on his life and ignored warnings to lay low. But in the world he ruled, mercy doesn't circle back. Only vengeance does. The footage became a grim mirror. A man who once decided who lived and who died, now frozen on film in the same position as his victims, face down, motionless, and alone. For investigators, it was another sign of Sydney's escalating gang war, one where former allies were being erased with the same precision they once used on others. For the underworld, it was a statement. No one is untouchable, not even the man called the Executioner. And as Sydney buried its dead, another city prepared for the same spectacle. Not in a driveway, but on the street outside an office, where a man tied to the country's deadly taxi wars would take his final ride. Taxi war boss killing, Cape Town, South Africa, 2022. The camera shows a calm morning. A man walking toward his car outside a small office in Cape Town's northern suburbs. For a few seconds, everything looks ordinary. Then, two gunmen step into frame. They move with the rhythm of men who've done this before. Fast, steady, no hesitation. The first shot hits him in the chest. The second drives him to the ground. By the time the third lands, the job is done. This was no robbery. It was the latest in a string of targeted hits tied to South Africa's taxi wars, a decades-long conflict over control of public transport routes worth millions in cash. For years, rival associations have fought for dominance, killing drivers, owners, and bosses in broad daylight, each death erasing one name, making space for another. The victim that morning was a regional taxi association leader, a man both respected and feared. He'd been warned more than once that his position made him a target. Still, he refused security. He told his drivers that fear only gives the enemy power. CCTV from a nearby store captured the entire hit. The killers arrived, fired, and fled within 15 seconds. Their car was later found burned, stripped of plates, the same ritual used in dozens of other assassinations. No arrests, no witnesses willing to speak. In Cape Town, the violence has become almost routine. Gunmen step out of traffic, pull the trigger, and disappear before the echo fades. Every route, every station, every rank has its own price, and the blood never dries before someone else comes to collect it. The killing outside that office was more than another score settled. It was proof that order no longer exists, only power shifting hands one bullet at a time. By the next morning, another name had already been added to the list. The footage from Cape Town ends as abruptly as it begins. A body on concrete, an empty street, a silent camera. But the next video would be different. This time, the violence wasn't business. It was personal. A home invasion turned execution, filmed not to send a message but to feed cruelty itself. Gladstone Park, home invasion, Melbourne, Australia, 2025. The attack began just after midnight. A quiet suburban home in Gladstone Park. Lights off, doors locked. The kind of house that looks invisible from the street. Inside, a 60-year-old man sat alone in his living room, scrolling through his phone. Then came the sound. A bang on the back door, glass breaking, and footsteps pounding through the dark. 4 masked men stormed inside. No hesitation, no words wasted. They moved with purpose, shouting his name, demanding money. He barely made it to his feet before the first hit landed, a hammer to the ribs, then another to the head. He fell. They kept going. The security cameras caught everything. Not with the clean detachment of CCTV, but with the raw, handheld cruelty of the attackers' own phones. One man filmed while the others beat, stabbed, and laughed. The victim's voice was barely audible, pleas smothered by noise. At one point, one of the intruders looked directly into the lens and grinned. They wanted to be seen. For nearly 10 minutes, the men toyed with him, part interrogation, part punishment. They demanded codes, names, cash. When he couldn't answer, they punished him again. A hammer against bone, a knife flashing in dim light, a voice saying, "Record this." Let him talk now. Then, silence. The man stopped moving. The camera lingered on his body before the group scattered, taking phones, wallets, and their own footage. Hours later, the video began circulating in encrypted chat groups, posted like a trophy. Within a day, it leaked to the media. Australian networks blurred faces and cut the sound, but even stripped of its detail, the footage was impossible to forget. Every frame reeked of intent, not robbery, not revenge, but performance. Police described it as one of the most sadistic attacks they had ever seen. Detectives traced the suspects to an extortion crew linked to a local biker gang, a group known for using violence to collect debts and prove loyalty. Each new video was part of a chain of intimidation, a visual language of fear traded between criminals like currency. By the time the arrests were made, the man was already dead, and the footage had spread across every corner of the dark web. It became another artifact in the growing archive of brutality, proof that modern gangs don't just kill for control anymore, they kill for spectacle. The violence isn't only the act, it's the replay, the reaction, the reach. And behind every clip there's the same chilling certainty. Someone pressed record knowing exactly what they wanted the world to see. The camera in Gladstone Park stopped when the killers were done, but in another country, another crew kept theirs rolling. Calm, methodical, almost casual. A man opened his front door to 7 rivals. Seconds later, he was dead. And one of his killers, caught on CCTV, would walk away and buy snacks as if nothing had happened. Greenock doorstep murder, Scotland, 2023. The street was quiet, a narrow row of houses in Greenock, the kind of place where neighbors know one another's routines. It was just after midnight when the killers arrived. 7 men, dark clothes, masks, a convoy of cars pulling up like clockwork. CCTV from across the street recorded every movement, the sound of engines idling, doors opening, then a group forming in the glow of streetlights, their shadows stretching long across the pavement. They moved quickly, surrounding the house of their target, a man linked to a rival gang, known locally for feuds over drug territory and unpaid debts. Inside, he was on his phone. He barely made it to the front door when the first shot hit, then another. Bullets shattered the silence, echoing through the neighborhood as the group unleashed a dozen rounds before retreating just as fast as they'd come. It was over in less than 30 seconds. The video shows the chaos clearly, muzzle flashes lighting up the night, the victim collapsing on his doorstep, the killers sprinting back to their cars. And then, one of them does something that still stuns investigators. Instead of leaving immediately, he walks around the corner into a nearby shop. Moments later, the CCTV inside that shop captures him buying snacks, calm, unbothered, as if nothing had happened. Police arrived within minutes, but the shooters were already gone. The street was littered with shell casings. The man lay dead in his doorway, the lights of his home still burning behind him. For detectives, it was the latest in a series of revenge attacks tied to Scotland's escalating drug wars. Tit-for-tat executions carried out by small gangs who operate like militias, using encrypted apps, stolen vehicles, and military-grade weapons. But this one felt different, not because of how it happened, but because of how casually it did. The footage showed a kind of numbness, the complete absence of fear, emotion, or urgency. The killers didn't panic, didn't run wildly. They were precise, practiced, and bored. Violence wasn't just a choice anymore. It was routine. The Greenock murder sent ripples across Scotland's underworld, a reminder that the new generation of gang killers aren't hiding in the dark. They're functioning in plain sight, comfortable under the lens. The cameras aren't their enemy anymore, they're witnesses to control. And while Scotland grieved another doorstep killing, Mexico bled again. In the same region where this story began, another video emerged, longer, louder, and even more merciless. A mass execution filmed among smoke and fire, turning an entire town into a warning. Totolapan mass killings and burnings, Mexico 2022. The final video didn't need explanation. It spoke in gunfire, smoke, and screams. Totolapan, a small town buried deep in the mountains of Guerrero, had seen blood before, but never like this. In October 2022, the people there woke to the sound of trucks rumbling through the narrow streets. Heavily armed men, dressed in black, their faces covered, their rifles gleaming in the morning sun. They weren't hiding. They were filming. The footage begins in chaos, villagers running, engines revving, shouts echoing through the air. Then the camera steadies, focusing on the men kneeling in the dirt. A line of bodies waiting for what comes next. No mercy, no pause. The gunfire erupts, a single command unleashing a storm. When the smoke clears, a dozen bodies lie still, dust settling over them like ash. But the killers weren't finished. They dragged the bodies together, poured fuel, and set them alight. Flames climbed high into the sky, thick smoke blotting out the town's horizon. Someone laughs behind the camera. Another voice shouts a name, the name of a rival cartel, before the fire roars louder, drowning out the sound of men. For the people of Totolapan, this wasn't war. It was a message. A declaration from the familiar Michoacana cartel to anyone daring to challenge their control of Guerrero's land, poppy fields, and extortion routes. The attack wiped out not only rivals, but civilians, local officials, even a mayor who had refused to bend to the group's demands. Days later, investigators arrived to a town half-burned, its streets empty except for the scent of fuel and death. What they found matched what the video had shown: charred remains, melted metal, and a silence so heavy it felt like punishment. By the time the footage reached the internet, it had already done its job. The terror didn't need to spread. It was already there, in every home that watched it. For Mexico, Totolapan became another dark milestone, proof that the cartels no longer needed secrecy, only visibility. Each new video, each new killing, wasn't about hiding power. It was about performing it. Terror as theater, death as declaration. The line between war and propaganda had vanished. The camera had replaced the gun as the ultimate weapon, because what's filmed lasts longer than what bleeds. And so the pattern continues. The faces change, the places change, but the rhythm never does. A camera turns on, a message is sent, and another chapter is written. In violence, in fire, and in full view of the world. These are the crimes we weren't meant to see. But someone wanted us to. Across every continent, the lens has replaced the witness. The killers no longer hide in the dark. They stare right into the camera, knowing we'll be watching. Because in their world, fear isn't silence, it's viewership. And every time we look, the cycle begins again.